break so we can discuss this when we're done. Let's do 10 minutes and we'll come back. Oh, yeah. Okay, we're calling the meeting back to order. And before we go into commission discussion, I'm going to disclose a few things here. One of the, Mr. Smith brought up the fact that I sat down with them and discussed some issues with them, and I did sit down with a bunch of houndsmen in Winnemucca. We had houndsmen from Eureka, Elko, Winnemucca, Fallon, Yerington, all over show up to a meeting that I held personally in Winnemucca. I just wanted to disclose that so everybody knows what that was about. I heard some things coming from the houndsman during testimony and some discussion with houndsmen after the meeting. And No Bear Hunt brought to me an idea that if the houndsman would agree to give up hounding of bears, they would sign a letter recognizing the long-standing tradition of mountain lion hunting with hounds in the state of Nevada. That was offered up. It didn't get accepted, but I felt as my position on the commission, if I hear two sides that were kind of had some similar thoughts, maybe I need to talk to both sides and see if we can get to a resolution before we get back here. We didn't get to that resolution, but I just wanted to disclose that I tried, and now we're ready for commission discussion. Who wants to start? Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to try to speak loudly because I know that I had some issues trying to hear some of the testimony, but I want to make it clear to everyone that, and maybe I'm going to disclose, I guess disclosure is probably the right term that I want to use here, is that although in my private life I'm the chair of the Las Vegas Valley Humane Society, the Las Vegas Valley Humane Society is no way associated, is not a subsidiary of the Humane Society of the United States. Many people don't understand that, and the Las Vegas Valley Humane Society was not a party to this petition. So I want to make that very clear to the people who are at this committee. That being said, I also maybe no one wants to hear me anyway. Can everyone hear me now? No. Can we try it one more time? With that being said, I do want to point out that, you know, when I took this position, Ken suggested to me one of the things I really need to look at to understand the whole issue, since I have been, while involved in the animal world for some time, that I really needed to take a look at the North American model of wildlife. And the thing that interested me so much about looking at that model was that the model holds very many of the same principles that I personally believe. And I think that most people personally believe, whether they're hunters or they're non-hunters. The issue is that the idea that wildlife is available, it's an equity issue, that wildlife should be available to everyone and accessible to everyone. It's not limited only to hunters, and that's a very prime underlying principle. And it separates this model from other models that are available. And I've really been impressed by that principle. And I think that's a very important principle, that we're all It's all about all of us caring about the wildlife in Nevada. And the other principle that I find really interesting was one, everybody keeps talking about this issue of fair chase, and I have to say that I wasn't sure that I totally understood that, and after the last testimony, and I've listened very carefully to all of the testimony that's been presented. I've tried to have a very open mind about this. I have my own views, but I wanted to, that's the whole purpose of testimony, is to listen to what people have to say. And so I've listened very closely, both at the CAB meetings that have been held and also in Reno and at this meeting, to the issues that have been addressed. And in terms of fair chase, one of the things I found out also in reading about the North American model of wildlife is it says that this is the Boone and Crocker Club, and I'm sure everyone who knows about the North American model of wildlife is familiar with the Boone and Crockett Club, but they define fair chase as the ethical, sportsmanlike, and lawful pursuit and taking of any free-ranging wild native North American big game animal in a manner that does not give the hunter an improper advantage over such animals. And so when I look at this issue, this is the issue that I see in terms of hounding. And it seems to me that what this commission is about is not necessarily about trying to look at the issue of making hunting easier, but we're trying to make hunting equitable, that we want to try to make sure that people can hunt. And I think that's a very important term. I think the other issue that I have some problem with is the idea of incrementalism, that if we get this, if you get this, then you're owned to something else. And I try to look at each one of these issues individually and try to address that particular issue. So I would say on the basis of that I would support this petition, and I would support this position because I feel like in some respects that we are providing an unfair advantage in terms of hounding in this particular issue. My concern as well is I understand that 14 states have outlawed this process, and that California has also outlawed hounding in terms of black bears, and I'm very concerned, and I think this commission should be concerned about what's going to happen now that it's been outlawed in California, and what are the issues in terms of houndsmen coming into Nevada, and how is that going to impact those businesses that are already here. Finally, I want to say that in listening to the CAB meetings, one of the concerns that I have is that I don't believe that the commission should be about dogs or the management of dogs. And I am concerned from the standpoint that in looking at the legislative statutes in 574, which does address animal issues in Nevada, that in many instances regarding some of the legislation that tries to protect animals, hunting dogs or animals that are used for hunting, just like for purposes of agriculture, those animals are excluded from much of this. So there is a real gray area. And I've heard a lot in terms of houndsmen talking about how much they care about their animals. And I guess my concern on this is that I think their love of animals says one thing, but their love of animals also says that we're not talking about animals that stay in one's house and they're companion animals. These are animals that are strictly used for one purpose, and that's for hunting. And I think the gentleman today talked about the fact that you've got to go out and break the ice and make sure that the animals are fed. I was glad to hear about the idea that you want to be careful that your animals don't get hurt, the dogs don't get hurt because the vet bills are very high. That's the first time I've heard about that. But I personally have some issues about how dogs in this in this particular instance are treated, and I'm not convinced that this is a business that we really want to get into because it is such a gray area. Finally, and I'm going to try to make this short, I know I've talked on too much, but I think that we have to look at this for what it is, and that's in terms of hounding for black bears. And that's when I'm looking at this issue, and that's why I would support the petition, because what I'm understanding is that it gives us the opportunity to talk further about this issue.
Commissioner Rain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully don't need a microphone to hear me. Never know. Like the full text of my comments be included with the minutes of this meeting, please. First, I'd like to thank you who took their time out of their schedule to come down to Vegas and speak about this issue again. Kind of brings me to the next point, which is, you know, a lot of the talk about this issue is to give the opportunity to express opinion regarding bears, to get public opinion on this. I was talking with another individual who's been kind of watching the commission about the amount of time of public testimony that there's been on the bear issue. You know, I've had hundreds and possibly into the low thousands of unique emails from hundreds of people whom I have reason to believe are actually residents of the state of Nevada, plus many emails from others that I'm not sure of. This commission has held somewhere, we'd say we're debating on it in the realm of 40 to 50 hours of public hearings between full commission meetings and committee meetings on the bear issue at large, and much of that when the bear season was initiated. A lot of it at most meetings, hounds came up. They were there on most every meeting. Somebody was talking about it. It was, you know, this is not the first time or second time or 12th time that this has been spoken about by this body. So that's, you know, it's been hashed over a lot in very, very recent years. And the decisions have all ended up basically in the same place. You know, I'm very worried about some of the comments that come out in the anti-hounding community or anti-bear hunting community, because it appears that, you know, anthropomorphism, I believe is what the correct term is, seems to be rampant in our society, or otherwise referred to as the Disneyfication of wildlife. You know, people start talking about these bears with giving them basically human characteristics, and that seems to be a prevailing method of thinking on this issue, and it's somewhat bothersome, because these are wild animals. They're indeed dangerous wild animals, and that's something to be taken into account. I find the interesting comments about fair chase, you know, this is somehow cheating or unsportsmanlike. Well, so okay, so get rid of this, what do you do? Okay, well, guns, guns, that's probably cheating too. Well, what about knives? Well, how short of a knife? There is no end to that argument as far as it goes. It's just goes down and goes down. What is indeed sportsmanlike? That road will never end. Well, it's so easy with hounds. Well, okay, so it takes you, one gentleman was saying 35 days. Some people get them sooner. I mean, my longest hike was about 6 weeks. Solo hikes about 6 weeks. Do you have to do that? Is that sportsmanlike? No, that's not long enough. I've met people that outdid me by several months. You know, there is no end to these arguments. This is a reasonable utilization of our wildlife resources, and that has come again and again throughout the discussions over the years. This is not about dogs and bears, this discussion today. I don't see that. I believe it is no more about that than, for example, our previous decisions about the Tahoe Basin was about the Tahoe Basin. It was not. This is about anti-hunting. This is, you know, with respect to other people, it is about incrementalization. You know, these people have an agenda, and it's a legitimate agenda, and I'm happy to hear from it, but it is an anti-hunting agenda. And as has been pointed out in meeting after meeting after meeting, this is from nobearhuntnevada.org, not No Bear Hunt Tahoe Basin, not No Bear Hunt with Hound. That's the goals of the organization, and it's leading down the road by every word that has come from the proponents that I have heard and the support materials that I've heard on the subject. Believes it a legitimate, reasonable use for our wildlife resources to include the hounds, and therefore I don't see any reason to go any farther with this petition. Thank you.
Any other commission comment? Commissioner Macbeth?
I think Commissioner Raines has pretty much stated my position. I want to stress that this commission spent hours and hours and hours on this specific issue. We beat it to death. And we heard all the testimony, and we saw all the reports. NDOW brought forth all of the studies with respect to the use of hounds. And we made our decision, based on a full vetting of that issue. And so therefore, to come back just merely 2 years later makes no sense to me. We've wasted enough resources on this issue. The second thing that I want to reiterate is that we talked about coming back at some point in time after the hunt, after we had enough years of the hunt under our belt to reconsider the entire hunt, and this issue would be just one of those issues. After 2 years, definitely after 2 years, I have heard nothing. There have been, notwithstanding all of the parade of horribles that the anti-hunters have brought to this commission about what could happen, there's not been one shred of evidence of anything actually happening in the state of Nevada. And so we're talking about an issue where we have identified no problem, that there's been no events that have caused any injuries to dogs or any injuries to hunters or any injuries to anybody. So my position is that I'm going to vote to deny the petition, and we can consider this with this issue with all the other issues on the bear hunt when we get to that point.
Commissioner Morai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've tried to look at this issue objectively, as with all other issues that we're faced with, and I supported the closure of the Tahoe Basin to bear hunting because I thought that was a reasonable thing to do. That was going against the recommendation of sportsmen's groups and county advisory boards. With this issue, some other things that I tried to consider was what was the best for the bears, and the nearest that I could tell, in my opinion, was that the loss of the use of hounds for bears may not be in the best interest of bears. The way I try to approach these issues is in our business, the one that I'm familiar with, a lot of times decisions are made while we are a minority and we know that we may be outvoted with the general public's opinion. And so I try to look at these things and break it down to who would be the most highly impacted or adversely affected by this measure. And what I've kind of come up with in my mind is that the sportsmen, the houndsmen, they know the consequences of this measure, whatever decision we make today. They have chosen to face those issues, And so I'm going to support the county advisory boards and the sportsmen's groups in voting to deny the petition.
Commissioner McNitch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, through the, historically, I can't say that I've been the biggest supporter of accepting petitions. You know, it commits a lot of resources, a lot of resources, and it commits a lot of time by the people that come into these rooms and provide comment. So I don't, and I'm certain that nobody on this board takes them lightly. We realize when we make a decision like that, the commitment that's being made, and in a lot of ways on behalf of everybody, whether they like it or not. So we don't take them lightly. I have, for a very long time, advocated for very open processes where discussions could occur, and unfortunately, we're on the mend still as a commission, and I feel like we're just getting back to that a little bit. And I feel like we did have a road speed bump in the road there for a while, and so I believe I don't see the problem with the continued discussions on some of these issues. This is a new hunt. I do understand and don't necessarily disagree with the concept of waiting a period of time before we go back and evaluate things. But we deal with a different world. We deal with a socio-political world too as a board. And I do believe that there's a lot of socio-political issues with pretty much everything having to do with the bear hunt, hounding just being one of them. So I'm not concerned about bringing stuff back early in the process to reevaluate and get stuff out on the table. There might be things. I haven't necessarily considered all the merits of hounding or not hounding. There's certainly a lot of stuff that's been presented. I'm not convinced that we've heard all that we need to hear. I'm not convinced that all my questions have been answered. And I think that it's in our best interest to continue that process and evaluate a little bit. We don't exactly have, not current commission notwithstanding, we haven't had a very good track record with the legislature recently as a commission, and I think that we have a need to manage their perceptions about how we conduct our business. And to me, that means having the discussion, continuing some of the discussions that may have been going down the path before, see if it can be vetted out further. Maybe it's a dead end, I don't know, but I'm willing to commit the time. I'm willing to commit the resources to continue down that path. So, and I will say, I do very much respect the sportsman's concerns with the concept of this incremental. It does exist out there, I believe, and I do very much understand those concerns. You have to look at some websites. There are a number of websites out there that talk about how to progressively and persistently break things down. Okay, so I do understand those concerns. I do believe they're a reality, and it's unfortunate, but I'm not convinced that that's the case here, and I'm not so unconfident with our process and our ability to make decisions that I consider that an overwhelming threat to what we do here. So I will be supportive of the petition, not based on the merits of it necessarily, but based on the fact that I've been committed to an open process to continue the discussions and make sure that they get vetted out, understanding that we've been through a lot already.
Mr. Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to thank all the members of the public and sportsmen, all the different interested parties for this, that have brought all this information. Being new to the board, relatively new, the last 6 months, it's really been quite an educational process for me. And I think it's no secret that I'm representing a sportsman, and I am a sportsman. I love to hunt, and I love to fish. I have never hunted bears, nor do I ever plan on hunting bears. I'm a deer, elk, and bird hunter, you know, the old standard Nevada hunter. I've never used dogs hunting. I may want to go kill a mountain lion someday, and I probably would use dogs. I have no interest in bear hunting. So with that said, I will bring up a couple points that I see. First and foremost, hunting is ethical, appropriate, reasonable, and I think generally reflected in society as a legitimate pursuit. I certainly enjoy it, and I know there's a lot of other people that enjoy it. This argument boils down to me a lot about what Commissioner Lane said today was the appropriateness of the fair chase, or whose definition of fair chase that is, and whether or not the use of dogs is ethical, if it's fair to the bear, if it's fair to the dog. And that's a very difficult position and to understand, because I certainly understand a lot of what was said here today, and I appreciate what you said, and I respect your opinions. But I get a little tired of society of other people making determinations as for other people's way of life, what is fair. It's no secret I was in law enforcement for 28 years, served as the sheriff of this county. I've been in a lot of different circumstances where differences of opinion and definitions of fairness, equitable treatment among human beings were discussed, and how the law was applied to different people, different groups of people, minorities, different way of thinking of people. And one thing I learned is there's a hell of a lot of different opinions out there in society today. There's much more than when I was younger, and there's going to continue to be more in the future. But I think we have enough laws. I think we have enough people telling other people how to live their lives in a lot of ways. And I think that we've got to have some acceptance of the variant ways that people choose to pursue happiness and their recreation and having some fun with their family or just for themselves. And I personally see a long historical use of dogs in hunting that I quite don't understand why we have to break that tradition and change that. Also, I think this board did a lot of work on this hunting of bear process prior to my arrival. And to me, they had plenty of time, the appropriate time, as prevalent as role of dogs would have played in it, that should have been addressed then, rather than come back just 2 short years into this hunt and say that dogs need to be removed from the hunt. So for that reason, I'm not in support of the petition. Thank you.
Commissioner Wallace?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start out by saying that I've been involved in this bear hunt from day one, from the day that it was presented to us at the Fallon meeting. It's been long enough ago, I can't even remember the date. It was in August. We had Mr. Lackey there. We went over the populations. We went over every aspect of it. It was on the agenda. Everything was there. We didn't have anybody there to stand up and say, hey, this is really not good, or I have this opinion, or anything of that respect. And over the past few years, we've spent countless hours, and I've spent countless hours with emails. I mean, this last 2 weeks, probably, I didn't count them. I would imagine somewhere 40 to 50 emails. Some of them came through Suzanne to me. Some of them came directly to my email off the website. But that's nothing compared to what we dealt with from the very beginning of this hunt, and the discussions about the hunt, about the hounds, baiting. I mean, we went through the whole 9 yards, and it's been a long road, and we've discussed it. We've talked about it. I've read email upon email. And I think it's a management tool that we have to manage our bears in Nevada. And, it's been years ago, but I've been on a bear hunt with dogs. And to say that it's cheating, that's far from the truth. I mean, we went out early. I don't even remember what time we got home, but it was dark. And we covered countless miles, and that was long before GPS collars or any of that. I mean, it's not for me. I didn't participate in the hunt as a hunter. I just went along with some friends, and I had a good time, and it was fun to watch the dogs work and see how dedicated the people were to their animals, and to talk with them. And I mean, they told stories about times that they were out with their dogs and had to sleep out in the woods, waiting for the dogs, hoping the dogs would come find them, because they'd looked and looked and looked, and you know, those dogs were those people's family, just as much as their children. And to hear people testify today that they're that important, you know, I've seen it firsthand, and it's true. To think that it's inhumane to the dogs loved it. I mean, they lived for that. I mean, there was one dog that they left at the house, and that dog was not happy that it didn't get to go along with everyone else, and you could tell. So I mean, I've been there and I've listened to it. I've read all the emails, and it's a management tool. And from my ag background, a gentleman brought up some of the issues that they have up in Smith Valley and in those areas. You know, it's a management tool that if we lose that, I don't know what the results would be, but I'm pretty certain in order to meet management, we're going to have a lot more tags out there. And I don't know what people might think about that. We'll be right back here to talk about it for another 6 hours of why are you wanting to issue more tags? And I can't support the petition at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Drew.
All right, without belaboring this a whole lot more, I say kind of tongue-in-cheek, one thing that I think has been lost in all of this is I think a little bit of the process, and I think a little bit of the timing and urgency of this situation. And one of the questions that I've had for the department, and they've been relatively neutral on the whole thing, but what it comes down to me is I'm not sure it's within this commission's purview to determine what fair chase is, or to define that, or to define whose values are righteous or correct. I think that's how you're raised, how you're brought up. But this board's job, and I can sympathize with some of the commissioners who think maybe we spent too much time on this issue. I would disagree. I think it's our job to spend whatever's needed for time on an issue. But I think our job is to look at the management aspects of it. I don't think we should be viewing issues in a bubble. We need to step back every now and then and look at the bigger picture. And one of the things is, I don't think we've answered the question, is there an immediate need from a management standpoint or from a biological standpoint to suspend the use of dogs immediately? And Director Mayer, I don't know if you're comfortable answering that, but I know it's one question that hasn't been answered. Is there an immediate need to suspend the use of dogs for the bear hunt, either biologically or from a management standpoint?
I don't believe so. In reviewing the literature, I don't think that there's an immediate need for sure. I think it's really a public debate on, I don't really think it's about biology, quite frankly. So, yeah, I would not recommend that.
And that's kind of been my sense on the issue. So when I look at it, it's more of a process thing for this commission. Have we talked about it too much? Has everyone had the proper time to present their views and arguments? The concern I have specific to the petition is it's looking at one very small issue and nested within one very large issue. And we made a commitment to do things we needed to do from an adaptive management standpoint, to review the hunt, all those things. But I think looking at very small issues one at a time is going to create issues for the bigger picture. And so I don't disagree with Commissioner McNinch when he says, you know, I don't have a problem taking the time and doing my job to vet this more, but at the same time, I think we need to look at it on a broader picture. And so kind of where I'm going with this is, I don't think I can support the petition at this time, but I don't have any issue tabling this to the committee that we've established for this issue and dealing with it on a broader scale when that time is appropriate. And so that's kind of where I'm leaning, and I'll hold back on making a motion to that effect until the commissioner has an opportunity to speak.
I've heard everybody